Hey guys, welcome to Bada Boom. It's Chris and our resident hater, Mike. We're excited to finally get to the season finale. And when I say finally, it's been a drag these last few episodes, which is weird because the season finale actually was the quickest episode of all the episodes. Um, but yeah, if you've been liking this, please like, subscribe, comment below. Let us know what you think of The Last of Us. Did it break the video game curse? I don't think it did. I think they front loaded a bunch of episodes and those were great, and the rest of it was meh. I know Mike didn't really like it, but we'll discuss that. So, what did you think, Mike?
Let's start with episode 8, which was the when in need he will provide episode. And something I noticed from the very start of the show, and it kind of became apparent as it went on, is that the show really beats you over the head. The game is much more subtle in basically everything. And in episode 8 in particular, David and his community being like super religious, that's not in the game. It's only, like, very slightly hinted at through that sign that they have in that restaurant where they congregate, and you only see it for a couple, you when I actually first played the game, I didn't even notice that. I didn't even know that there was, like, a religious kinda connotation with David. So, it's like they lost all of the subtlety when they were writing the show, and I don't know if that's because, the same people that were working with, Neil Druckmann when he was working on the game aren't with him anymore, so they're not there to kind of pull him back into reality and say like, "Hey, don't go overboard with that." Or is it because they're making a show for a wider audience and just wanna make it abundantly clear what the themes and the motivations are of everybody? So, I don't know exactly what the motivation is behind making it so obvious with everything, but I don't like it. I think it's much better when these things are subtle and you can kinda, gleam, the characters' motivations and little stuff like that just from the background. Seeing in the background is more than enough for me. And just in general, I think the show has a lot of cliches in it as it is, and just having, like, a very obvious post-apocalyptic religious cult is just, like I said, cliche. It doesn't really add anything, and it would have been much more interesting to keep it subtle and have the audience kind of discover uh, what's going on in the background kind of on their own. It's just more interesting that way. And one thing that also really bothered me was the performance. I would have really liked to have seen Nolan North reprise his role because he played David in the game, and he just brought like this really awesome creepiness to the character. That's just, and again, subtlety in the performance that's just not there in the show. Like it's just so obvious that David is like evil. And, in the game, it's just he's just a better character overall. What did you think of episode 8?
Episode 8, I liked it. Obviously, I didn't play the game, so I didn't have like the point of reference. So some of the reveals that go on, I'm like, oh, that's pretty interesting and stuff. But it's one of those things where it's the second to last episode, and some of the things I think needed to happen in terms of Ellie and Joel's relationship in the context of the show to kind of get to that final episode where you feel like, hey, this is his daughter is not actually happening. So, if you go throughout the show, we get very little time with them actually building their relationship. There's so much time spent on, it seems little things in a game that I'm sure were left on the cutting room floor. Or someone said, hey, we don't really need this because it's not great. But they were like, you know what? It'd probably be better for a TV show. And they put it in the TV show. And weirdly enough, the show almost feels like an anthology in that way, where these episodes, yeah, they connect, but in a lot of ways, they're their own vignettes about sort of like the brutality of this world. And with that episode, it was cool, but I was like, this does not feel like the second to last episode. And that really was confirmed with the last one because it seemed like they had to rush through a lot. And there was, I don't know if you felt this, but like Joel almost was like too nice. He's like, my daughter would have loved you. All these things that I'm like, wait a minute, where is this coming from?
It's the
Um,
lack of
and I
subtlety
felt
coming up again.
yeah. So it's like all that stuff, you're like, "Wait a minute, I thought this was, the most well-written video game ever. Where's all this, like, cheesiness coming from?" And again, it really peaked at the beginning, and I think it was hard to mess up those opening episodes because the opening of the game is so iconic and all time in a lot of ways. So I think it was hard to fumble that, but with the later stages of the game story where it's very complex, is very ambiguous, sort of the things that are going on, it's very violent. They just weren't able to land the plane on a lot of those things.
Yeah, and, moving on to the season finale, uh, does it bother you that Marlene knows Ellie from literally the moment she was born? It just kinda seems like a massive coincidence that the leader of the resistance who's working on a cure just happens to know the one person that is immune to the fungus, and this also bothered me in the game. In the game, but it's not as obvious, again, in the game, Marlene just says that she knew Ellie's mom and that she knows Ellie, so it's kind of ambiguous as to how well she knows her, but in the show, they make it, like, very obvious
Hey,
that
we're
she
best
knows.
friends.
Yes, exactly.
And, not to cut you off, but like in the game and obviously in the show, Joel has to make a decision. And it's not really a decision at all. He goes in, kills all of the fireflies to save Ella because they're going to perform a surgery on her to theoretically lead to a cure. But if Marlene knew Ellie's mom that way, it almost seems like she would be more justified to do that. And it almost feels like, wait, well, why don't you care at all? Uh, which is weird. It kind of like makes some of the I compared it, I think I might have texted you this. Like it almost felt like a superhero origin story with Ellie.
No, that's what it
Like, yeah,
was.
and
That's what it
it
was.
and she had to be connected to Marlene in that almost like super villain like way. Like, hey, like I'm almost like your aunt, but like now I'm a villain. And again, that was weird because it in the game, from watching the gameplay, it's a decision that Joel makes that I think people are still arguing about to this day. When you watch it in the show and it plays out, it's shot really well when he's killing everyone, but in terms of the decision he makes, you're like, oh yeah, this is definitely the right decision. These people are nuts. They definitely can't put a cure together. Also, Marlene, like literally her mom gave her to you. And you're like,
Yeah,
yeah, I'm
yeah.
gonna just so there's that, and it definitely feels it just feels off, I don't think it's bad, but especially when you have something that worked, it's weird. And also, like, again, there's so much they spent so much time on frankly dumb shit. And they created like this whole like 10-minute story on Ellie's, superhero origin, yet it rushes through that whole hospital thing. It's almost like immediately like he's like, all right, like they knock him out. He's like, all right, we're gonna take you, far away, whatever. And immediately in 2 seconds he kills everyone, which is fine. I don't like I can suspend, like, hey, he was deaf in one ear up until now. And you're just like, wait a minute, this happened really fast. And sort of like the emotion is kind of like taken out of all of it. Like I did not at no point feel like, oh wow, he really took the agency away from Ellie. Like that would be like, oh, he took the like she took the agency away from him when she, stuck him with penicillin. Like that's how on the nose and weird that whole scene feels because of the lack of subtlety, the lack of ambiguity, just because they found the need to explain certain things or give characters that don't need any lines more lines, and it just made something that I felt maybe was executed better in another medium feel like really clunky.
Yes, that's definitely now that you mention it, it does feel like they just wanted the show to be over. They were like, "Let's just get this over with." Like you mentioned, it's the shortest episode we've had
Yeah,
yet. So it
because
does
the
feel
real the
very
real fun is
strange.
coming.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, oh, I know.
Yeah.
It definitely does feel like this should have been the culmination of the series, and it doesn't really feel like that because, like you said precisely, it feels very rushed, and I'm gonna disagree with you. I'm gonna say it wasn't shot very well, especially given the story up until this point, because Joel has been borderline incompetent the entire time, and now all of a sudden he just turns into the Terminator,
Which is like
and
a Pedro Pascal thing, if you're watching, not to pivot into Star Wars, but the Mandalorian is probably the most incompetent Mandalorian that ever lived.
just constantly getting his ass kicked.
Yeah, falling and, drowning and all that. So it's like, it tracks.
Yeah, it's the reason I even say that it's like the Terminator is because that whole sequence is very much like the police shootout in the Terminator, where he's just walking into people's bullets. It's really poorly filmed because he's just walking down a hallway and people are clearly shooting right at him and they're missing and he's just plowing right through them. And it works a lot better in the game. It's much more believable because you're controlling Joel and he's set up as being capable right from the start. And because you're controlling him and because you're performing these actions, the fact that you murder like 50 guys with machine guns, it's more believable. It's more grounded, even though it's completely crazy that that would happen. And I was actually thinking that they would do that because Marlene mentions that she lost a lot of people. And there could have just been like one line in there where like, oh, there's only like 5 of us left, like that would have made it so much better and believable that Joel, actually, if you're going to set up Joel as this frail old man who can't hear, and once again in the final episode, they get caught off guard by characters from off screen. Like you get to use that trope once, maybe twice, but the third time it just gets annoying. Like it just annoyed me when they just snuck up on them again. I don't understand why they couldn't have come up with a more elegant solution to get them into that hospital like they did in the game. In the game, it's done better. It really feeds into the larger issue of having like multiple directors on the show. If they had actually hired someone who was like really adept at like action sequences or just like creating tension in general, because that's another thing that really annoyed me throughout the whole series, is there's just a lack of tension, and a lot of that is down to the camera work. You can create a lot of tension just by how you frame a scene, right? And there's none of that. Like all of the cinematography is very, for lack of a better word, pedestrian. It feels like I'm watching like an AMC original, right? It doesn't feel like I'm watching an HBO original, which is a much higher standard. And this just feels like something I'm watching on basic cable. So that was also something that I really didn't like. And just the production value in general, like that shot of them looking at the giraffes is supposed to be this very emotional moment, but all I could think of was, oh man, that's really crappy CGI. And then whenever the camera turns back to them, it's so obvious that they're on a set and like the lighting doesn't match. That stuff really took me out of the experience. And
It's
my
funny,
solution to that,
the
yeah,
giraffe was actually real.
well,
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
first shot, but in the second shot when they go out onto the roof, that's what I'm talking. That first shot was okay. I don't mind the
Mm,
first shot. I'm talking about that second shot
yeah.
in particular. That one was that like really took me out of the experience. And I think it could have been fixed if they had just from the very beginning gone with a single director. And I know that it complicates certain things, but if you have someone like, I would suggest Paul Thomas Anderson or Jeremy Saulnier or even a Cary Fukunaga, even though I know the only thing he's going to be directing in the immediate future is going to be his fellow prisoners in
Yeah.
their theater group. But if he was available, like these people understand how to like film a sequence, right? They understand how to create tension. They understand how to really pull the audience into the experience, right? And all the people that were attached to this show, the multiple directors that were on it, just don't have that skill set. And it's blatantly obvious. I mean, the entire show, the entire series, the only time I felt genuine tension was those 5 seconds in the museum when they're hiding from the clickers. They're moving around, they get the glass, and it's like this really nice shot. And it's funny because that's the episode that Neil Druckmann directed, and it's his directorial debut. He's never directed anything before. So the only thing I can think of is that he went for like a bathroom break or something, and some PA was behind the camera, and it was actually competently shot for 5 seconds, and then Neil came back, and the clickers go crazy, and everything's garbage again. So yeah, I mean, overall, all of the issues that I've kind of had with the show come to a head in the final episode. So it really is a culmination of the series, but in the worst way possible, as far as I'm concerned. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, they the worst habits, and something you brought up that I think it is really clear is that they were not interested in this piece of the game. There are other parts, little parts, or side stories or new characters that they created that they really wanted to focus on. And it seems like, again, it at times feels like an anthology just because of the flashbacks and the lack of sort of anything moving forward in a meaningful way. um like, I really don't feel like they went on a journey. At no point did I feel like, hey, this, he's really trucking this person along, you know what I mean? It doesn't feel, um I lost that, along the way. I think early on it felt connected and things were moving, when Tess died and stuff like that, but they just got sidetracked. um and with that, like, you got to this point where I don't know if they ran out of money or they were just like, hey, everyone knows what happens in the game, so let's just get it over with. um but it feels so sudden and abrupt, where I'm sure, as like, and obviously I'm leaning on you, is in the game, I'm sure that ending feels like it gets its time to breathe, you know? I'm sure that sequence of them, walking up and, her asking to swear, him to swear to her, um, is much more emotional. But like, watching it, I was like, yeah, I really don't care because it seems like you're being really fake right now. um,
It doesn't feel like they earned it.
yeah. And there are points where I think, they're really good actors, so they're able to sell it, but, some of the actions that happen, and just, again, that whole hospital scene kinda took me out just because of the setup, with Marlene. I was questioning it the whole time. I'm like, "Wait, like, that's basically her daughter." Like, if she knew Ellie's mom, like, at a certain point, like, when Ellie was, like, a kid, then you would get it, but, like, literally from womb to Marlene.
Yeah, I think here's my speculation. I think the reason that she knows Ellie is so that she doesn't come off like a total monster at the end, so that there's like a little bit of conflict in her about killing Ellie to get the cure. Like she wants to do it, she's gonna do it, but there's a little bit of conflict in her, and that's supposed to kind of like not make her look like a total villain because in the game there really are no villains. I mean, there are. I guess David would be considered a villain, like straight up. But even he has his like motivations. Like he just wants to keep his community safe and feed them. With a lack of a traditional villain and trying to make everyone kind of seem ambiguous, morally ambiguous, that's why I think that she knows Ellie in the game and in the show as well, and they make it even more obvious in the show. It's just to humanize her a little bit, not to make her like a bad person who just wants to kill Ellie to get the cure.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly why they landed on that, but it definitely, takes the wind out of the emotion of, like, not just the emotion, but, like, again, part of what makes the ending of that game so special is that you're questioning what Joel had to do. There are some people who get into that, that surgery room, that operating room, and they're trying to find a way to not kill the surgeon, Whereas when you watch this, you're like, yeah, he made the right decision, 100%. But what do you think, like what this means for season 2? Because I think the show definitely started to lag, and I don't think the second season will have sort of the strength that this one had in its opening. Because definitely as the season progressed, you saw them kind of like, hey, like, why are you leaning on these things? And because of the universal praise of the show in a lot of ways, I think they'll start to emphasize those things that really did not work around the show.
Yes, I think you're definitely right about that. The problem with Neil Druckmann is that he's constantly getting positive reinforcement from the critics, and so he sees no reason to change. I mean, he's gone on numerous interviews and said that he will not change anything, that he thinks the story is perfect as it is, and really, I don't blame him because if people are constantly telling him how great he is, like, why should he believe that he isn't, right? And to him, it's the people that matter. He doesn't really care what you and I think. He cares what the critics think, the important people in his mind. So he's gonna do the same thing he already did, and, there's the thing that works in his favor, especially with regards to the second game, is that the second game is just so goddamn long. It's like 20 to 25 hours. I remember it was such a miserable experience going through it, but for him, it'll work out perfectly because it'll make writing, 9 or 10 episodes a lot easier because you can actually fill that because there is a lot more going on in the second game than there is in the first. I mean, it's much more boring. I definitely won't be interested in watching it, but I'm sure to the people that'll be making the show, it'll be a lot easier because they'll have a lot more material to work with, and they won't have to create new characters and finagle stuff like they had to do with the first season.
Yeah, well, if they made the first season 6 episodes, they wouldn't have had to do all that. But, I
Oh,
am still
absolutely, absolutely.
so that's a hill I'll die on forever. But, the showrunner and, who co-wrote it with Druckmann has said that season 2 probably looks like multiple seasons. Um, which I'm sure as, HBO starts to get the reactions to and the ratings to season 2 when that comes in, they'll probably be like, "You know what? Yeah, we'll skip that. We'll skip that third season."
Listen, let me tell you something. That 3 or 4 season order is gonna turn into a 1 season order
Uh,
very quickly,
mhm.
very quickly. Because even the people that enjoy, the show now, I can't possibly see them enjoying the 2nd season if they follow the story exactly the same way as it was presented in the game, which, by all accounts, that's exactly what they're gonna do, so the only thing I can say is good luck dealing with the backlash.
I'm interested to see that debate because I didn't play the second game, but just seeing the way that played out online is
Good for you,
just
good for you.
thank you. Seeing the way that played out online, I don't think any company kind of wants that debate on their hands when it comes along. So we'll see. I wonder if it's going to be fast tracked, considering let's see how Druckmann kind of splits responsibilities. They've said they're working on their next game. It's not a Last of Us game. There is a new Last of Us game coming out, but it's a multiplayer game. Live services won't die, but so it'll be interesting. I think the first season had some really some good highs, but it ended up falling into the traps of all of these post-apocalyptic shows, and it ended up being just The Walking Dead. There was nothing outside of those first couple episodes that really added to any sort of conversation. It fell into sort of like these tropes, and I don't even know how anyone would be surprised by anything that happened in the show or shocked, even when they get captured for the hospital. Like, and this speaks to kind of like how poorly that scene was set up. Like, you saw the fireflies in the frame for like a good like 3 minutes, and it's just like, not this again, come on. It was even like, I think they were hoping you'd be like, oh my god, they're in the distance, like what's gonna happen. I'm like, not this again.
Yeah, you could have had just like a simple insert shot of like someone looking at them from above a building, just like a little bit of setup or just like and again, I like we've mentioned this before. It's they just wanted to be over with. They just wanted to get it done. So that's why it is the way it is. Since we're pretty much done, I mean, there's really not much more to say. I would ask you, since we're reviewing the full season as it is, what would you have changed? What do you think would have made the season better?
I mean, I said it like 2 minutes ago. Just make it 6 episodes. There's a lot of fluff in it, and it's clear the way they rushed through the finale that hey, like even 6 episodes would have been a little bit of a stretch. This really should have been like a 2.5 hour movie. I know video game movies get a bad rap, and sort of we're in this age of everything. needs to be a show. Disney Plus kind of ruined that, where they're like, "Hey, like we have this script for this average to below average movie. You know what'll really work if we turned it into a 6 hour movie." And sadly, I think a bunch of scripts that have been going around Hollywood that, maybe needed a little extra juice, those writers just put like under the the title TV series, and they were made because 9 hours for this, it was just way too much. And I think that you could see them filling it. It almost felt like network TV, where they were like, hey, we got to add some weird wacky character or something like that to fill the time. You definitely felt it. And even the last episode, which is short, they managed to put in a whole superhero origin story of Ellie's
That was completely
mom,
unnecessary.
completely unnecessary, and also deflated the debate of like, hey, did Joel make the right decision? It's like, well, Marlene's kind of a bitch, that's like her daughter. And, if anything, she should be upset. I do love the performances all around. Pedro Pascal, Bella Ramsey, everyone that kind of touched the show. I do think they brought their A game, and despite sort of the weirdness of the writing towards the last few episodes, they're able to kind of like shine through it. I think in the hands of less talented people, it would be unwatchable. But despite sort of my problems with it, I still um, enjoyed a lot of the show.
For me, the thing that I would have changed is similar to you is obviously make it shorter. If I'm in charge, if I'm the king of Hollywood, I make it a 2.5 hour feature, and I have, like I said, someone like Paul Thomas Anderson, Jeremy Saulnier, maybe the Cohen brothers, someone with like a defter hand at this. I definitely don't have Neil involved. I give him like a marquee producer's credit. That's it. And I also just change it up. I don't have the show be almost beat for beat for the game,
Word
because as
for
much as
word.
I talk yeah, as much as I talk about how I think the game did things better, I actually think one of the weaknesses of the show is that it's too much like the game. I feel like they could have really explored some other avenues and done certain things differently, even included like, completely new sequences or something like that. So that definitely would have, for me, if I was in charge, that's how I would have fixed it. And honestly, I kind of say that without arrogance. I honestly believe it would have made the experience better in a lot of
I
ways.
agree. I agree. I think we're aligned in that regard because some things are just too long these days. Um, they just flow. And
Some things?
something, all the things now, all the things.
Yeah.
It's bad when the CEO of Disney that is built on franchises is like, Bob Iger's like, um, I don't know about like doing third or fourth movies anymore. If we should really be doing that, we've the bubbles popped on all of this when Bob Iger saying that.
He admitted that they may have gone too far
A
in a
few
few places,
places, yeah,
basically.
exactly, exactly. George Lucas is a visionary. I think that line was basically him telling us, hey, there will come a time where you'll be like, hey, those prequels, they were very subtle. And he didn't go at that far. But yeah, thank you guys for listening. It was cool to go through a whole season. This was fun, especially like in throughout the dialogue. I felt like you definitely colored my opinion, Mike, with some things where I was like, oh shit, like I didn't really feel that way or notice that. Because I definitely the first few episodes I was on a high. I was like, man, I'm about to buy this game. I'm about to spend $70 on a 10-year-old game. Uh, and then as things went on, I was like, yeah, you're right. So thank you for coming on. Thank you guys for listening. And with that, bada boom.
Bada boom.